Generating traffic and sales can be a challenge for online merchants. But selling on the Walmart Marketplace puts your products in front of millions of customers who shop on Walmart.com. And right now, sellers who join Walmart Marketplace can save up to 50% on referral and fulfillment fees for the first 90 days. So get started today. Head over to marketplace.walmart.com/savings. That's marketplace.walmart.com/savings.
Welcome to E-Commerce Conversations, a podcast by Practical E-Commerce.
What's going on, Internet? Eric Bandels here, back again with another E-Commerce Conversations. Hope all's going well on the other side of me, on the other side of the pond, as they like to say. Damian Soong with Form Nutrition. What's up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm good. And like I was just saying, it's a pleasure to put a face to the name.
Yeah, we've been tweeting back and forth for, it's got to be like a year now.
Yeah, it has been a while. And I mean, it's interesting because I always like people on Twitter and just generally in the kind of people I listen to in the press and on podcasts and so on that kind of challenge my thinking a little bit. And you're one of those kind of few people that do on Twitter. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And you're not afraid to bounce things back, which I also appreciate because I can handle it. I certainly can handle it. And I know I can.
Otherwise, Twitter often feels to me a little bit just like a lot of, people praising each other all the time. And, that just gets a bit boring.
Yeah. Like Twitter is one of those things where you have to be a little antagonistic to get engagement, which like if you ever sat down with me, I would be antagonistic and then I would mend the fences is kind of how I do things. Yeah. But you don't always have that opportunity on social media. So I don't know, just my delivery is a little more careless and things like that. So, and I've thought through a lot of things too. So I just kind of share the things that I've thought through. But yeah, we've had some good conversations going back and forth about things broader than business. But your business is quite amazing as well. Form. When did you launch that?
So we launched in March 2017, so a little over 4 years ago now. Prior to that, obviously, there was about 18 months of research and development. So yeah, it's been a project for like over 5 years now.
So a little bias disclosure, I'm a customer of Form. I've got the pea protein and the shaker, and I did the cognitive, what do you call the cognitive pills?
Yeah, well, we have like Edge, which is a kind of daily cognitive nootropic, and also Boost, which is, great as a pre-workout. And Z's as well, sleep supplement. So the three of those are our core kind of nootropic offering as well. We have a multivitamin as well. And then the proteins, which obviously you're using as well.
So the thing that I would imagine is the hardest in the space is like the supplement space is got to be the most competitive, space you could ever imagine. And in addition to that, I see the most, what are they called? Unscrupulous marketers, just like the shady people who will get you into these contracts that you can't break out of. How do you stand out in that? How do you build a business in that?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question because I guess the whole kind of the backstory is that, my background is like super varied. I studied engineering. I went to work in the city. I did an MBA, got involved in startups, but I'd always been interested in nutrition and working out. So probably the first thing for me is it is a space that's always interested me. So I've always known it as a consumer and as a user. And yeah, I mean, it was around about like 2015 when Cowspiracy came out. That kind of time I started getting interest in the vegan space and the plant-based movement. And what struck me really initially was, that kind of vegan protein or that kind of veganism as a movement was not just going to be a trend. There was so much scientific evidence building up and so much kind of will building up around, health, around sustainability and obviously animal welfare. So it kind of really piqued my interest. And I think I literally just went out and I tasted all the vegan proteins at that time and they all tasted pretty terrible. And it just kind of struck me that it was a really crowded space, as you've just said, but it was very kind of crowded with everyone doing the same thing. And that for me became a little bit of a challenge. I think sometimes, a crowded space, it can be very daunting as an entrepreneur to enter, but it can also be an amazing opportunity because often crowded spaces are crowded with a lot of sheep. And I think for us back at that time, remember this is 2016 when we were planning and developing and 2017 when we launched, it wasn't the same kind of space that it is now. It was still very crowded, but everything was either those kind of big plastic gym bro type tubs with the terrible graphic design, or at the other extreme, the slightly hippie-ish kind of crazy health food shop type product. There was nothing in between that was a product that I thought would appeal to me as someone who wanted a performance product that was aspirational, but was also beautiful and not a big plastic tub that you'd have to hide away under the sink or something like that. So I think, I 100% agree. It was like a really crowded space. And, when I told my friends I was going to launch a protein powder, they thought I was completely crazy. They're like, why are you doing that? It's the most crowded space. And I was like, yeah, don't worry. It's going to be a vegan protein. And they were like, thought it was like completely bonkers. But, I think, like I said, that for me became the challenge and also the opportunity. And I think there was a lot of opportunity in terms of the brand as well. All of those, or a lot of those nutrition brands, they weren't doing anything more than delivering some protein for you. And I wanted to kind of elevate that whole idea of nutrition to be more than the protein shake after the gym, to be about how you nourish your whole self. And I think when you take a step back or a step up and you broaden that definition, it gives you so much more to kind of talk about and do as a brand. So for us, that's been about acknowledging that performance is very personal, whether you're an athlete or a busy mother or an entrepreneur or what have you. It means something different to you. And also to turn what by definition is about the self, right? Nutrition is about the self and, how you're going to meet your macros or meet your goals and do everything that makes you better, perhaps. But to turn that on its head and make it about other people as well. And that's where the aspects of our charitable work come in with our Form Feeding Fund, where we had a big focus on becoming a B corporation and using business as a force for good. So I think all of that kind of enabled us to stand out. And, and whenever I talk about all brand or any kind of marketing or anything, it's always on the assumption that it's product first, because I do believe that, none of that matters unless you've got a great product. And, we have a great product that people come back and repurchase time and time again. So I think that was, in a nutshell, that was how we kind of managed to stand out in what was a really crowded space. And I think because we spent, like I said, like 12, 18 months planning and doing all that, when we launched, we had really amazing support from the get-go from, all of the press here in London. We were the number one protein in, the Telegraph, Vogue, GQ, Men's Health, Women's Health, all of that. So we had really great awareness from very early on, which enabled us to kind of launch, not into a vacuum, which I think is maybe an issue for a lot of brands that launch. They spend all this time developing a brand, then launch, and then realize, oh shit, I need to kind of do some marketing, or I need to do some, need to get some kind of traffic or something. But we were lucky to launch into some awareness. We'd spent, I think, pretty much a year just developing an Instagram account, the Form Nutrition Instagram account, which before we launched, we just were interacting in the space, sharing interesting information. So we launched, I think, only with 5,000 followers, but it's still 5,000 more followers than the brand new fresh brand account. So those initial 5,000 followers became our first kind of customers as well. So yeah, it seems like a long time ago now.
Yeah, I want to touch base on a lot of things because I think we share a similar outlook in life, and we kind of alluded to it beforehand, but like I'm a big fan and believer of bootstrapping or building sustainable businesses that can scale on their own profitability. Not every business model is, like conducive to that, but I think a lot of product models are pretty similar. You took like an initial investment in bootstrapping your growth as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, we launched with just funded by ourselves with a really small amount of money. So everything we did was in-house with our small founding team and a couple of friends who are freelance designers and developers and stuff. And I think because we launched with a relative splash in London, and we're doing something quite different in the space with all of the values around the brand. And so we had a lot of interest from investors very early on. And, really, we didn't need to take investment. And we said no to a lot of investors because we didn't want to get onto that kind of treadmill of chasing numbers and being focused on a multiple. For me, I've kind of actually done that kind of journey before. And for me, and for Natalia and Pete, my co-founders, it was more about the journey, and we wanted to just make the right decisions along the way. Sure, we want to build an amazingly profitable, valuable business, but that is not the end goal for us. We believe that will happen by virtue of us making all the right decisions around the brand, by doing the right thing by our customers, by focusing on our products, and by doing all of that. But having said that, after about 2 years, I think at the end of 2018, we did take a really small investment round, from a really great multi-generational family investment house here in London. And, they've been fantastic. And the real reason we went with them was A, they had a great network, and B, they were really patient capital. So they've been fantastic. Yeah. But, every business is different. Some are much more capital intensive.
Was that capital for accelerating growth or inventory buys, or?
It was a little bit of everything, really. I mean, and a lot of just kind of contingency as well. It just enabled us to have a little bit of a cushion in the bank and not kind of fly quite so close to the ground. which I think, that's one thing, gives you a little bit of confidence to make some bigger decisions sometimes.
Yeah, make the mistakes that are required to grow.
Yeah. I mean, you'll know this as well. In many ways, yours is a very similar company. You design some products, you buy them, I guess, from a contract manufacturer that you work with, and you probably negotiated really good terms and as low minimum order quantities as you can to kind of conserve cash that way. So in many ways, our suppliers, who we developed really amazing relationships with early on, helped fund our business, basically, which I think is the best way, right? If you can use other people to fund and stop you having to raise or dilute or all of those things. And I think, sometimes that's something that's lost on a lot of people. And I think probably when we talked about kind of bootstrapping, and the reason why that is kind of almost my default mode prior to this, I ran a manufacturing company. And I think when you run a manufacturing company, it's like the toughest business. Every penny, every percentage point counts, and you can't afford to be kind of frivolous with money. So it gets ingrained into you to be really careful about every single dollar that you spend.
Yeah. I don't know. I think scarcity is one of those things that force creativity. And then when I think of encouraging new entrepreneurs out there, you have your brand creativity, you have your product creativity, but cash flow creativity is something that no one ever talks about that is vital. Because imagine, if you think about it, if you could get 30-day terms or 90-day terms, whatever the terms are, and sell that product before you have to pay the manufacturer, like you've essentially got no cash loss at all.
Yeah.
So there's great ways of doing that, but it gets really hard. The easy way is to buy, a million products and put them on the shelf and pay an arm and a leg and then, try to sell them. But the creative juices start flowing with that scarcity requirement. And ultimately, it makes your business so much better.
Yeah. And I think that's something I learned from running a manufacturing company, because that's, if you're in manufacturing, then you're buying raw materials, then they're sitting on your shelf for a little while in the warehouse. Then you're manufacturing something that might take a week or two. Then you're selling them, which might take however long. Then you're waiting for payment. So before you know it, your time to receive the cash for the initial raw materials that you purchase could be like 6 months or something. So you have to kind of do everything you can to shorten that cycle. And that's a lesson that kind of gets ingrained in you if you've been in that situation. And I think, I always say to, people that I speak to, a lot of founders, I don't think fully understand accounting. And I think one of the most important, or one of the most valuable things that I've ever learned is like how to properly read a balance sheet and how to, actually create the three accounting statements: profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow from trial balance. So to really have a deep understanding of accounting. It's not very glamorous and it's not much fun, but it's like very, very powerful when you understand kind of from first principles how all of those things affect your bank balance.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind for anyone out there who's not yet dipped their toes into accounting, it's a trash in, trash out too. So if you have a P&L that isn't properly set up or formed, then it's not going to be efficient to be able to read it. What kind of lessons learned do you have with accounting? Where can you get more resources on that? How do you understand it as someone who's more of a creative guy?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, I've got a very financial background. So my kind of background after studying was like working in the city. So I was an analyst in the city. So I was quite financial. Then I went on to do an MBA. So, I've studied a lot of accounting. But, I don't know where, but I'm sure there are just so many great courses just online at Coursera or those type of things, just to understand basic accounting. It's literally the kind of like to understand those three accounting statements. It's probably the kind of thing you could do in an afternoon and do really well in a day or two. So it's not like, you have to study 6 months or a year or something, just that kind of basics to really understand. I think you just have to do a bit of, Googling and figure it out. There's probably a lot of people that talk about it on YouTube, that kind of stuff, but just to understand that basis of cash.
Yeah, I've always been a very conservative person with my finances, and it kind of, when you're not chasing growth at all cost, by having a little bit of that padding or that cushion in the bank, it allows you to turn down opportunities that aren't a good fit for the business. Maybe like a sale or a discount or, something to hit a number that you have to do payroll on. But also if there's any kind of big opportunities, like I don't know if you guys have any plans to go into retail or if you're just going to stay D2C, those larger inventory buys, you're able to self-finance with a little bit of that buffer in there too.
Yeah, so we have quite a large wholesale business in the UK, where places like Selfridges, Harrods, Planet Organic, and so on, which are fairly large. But in the US, not so much yet. Obviously, that's something we're going to start to look at. We are at places like Equinox and Sun Life Organics in Malibu, those kind of like kind of cool kind of stockist, but nothing of massive volume yet. That will be something that will come down the road for us.
Well, as an American customer, let me first say a couple things. The buying experience is great. Like you would not even know you're buying from someone who's sending it from, you send it from the UK?
Yeah, yeah.
And before we get into the international business, I first want to touch base on your post-purchase flow, which was the coolest thing ever. Inside of my order, I got a variable data printed card. It was super cool. It had a recipe of this coffee beverage using your product. And I immediately did that. I made the
coffee.
Really?
That's great.
Yeah, because I have an espresso machine. And then I was just like, yeah, this is great. And blended it all up. And like that kind of value add, I feel like you're just not able to get from a mass market vendor or an Amazon type of an account. First of all, do a better job of explaining what you've set up, because I know that couldn't have been easy.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way of explaining it. So probably everyone listening or most people will understand kind of email marketing and how their kind of email CRM or database will have everyone's email addresses and know what products they've purchased. And then you'd be able to build flows and so on to send emails based on the product decisions or product purchases that people have made. What we've developed is basically that kind of system, but to print and customize the order booklet. So if Eric has purchased chocolate peanut, then it gets a recipe that goes with the chocolate peanut. And if he's purchased, Z's, it's maybe got a recommendation for something that goes well with Z's. If it's your first order, it will be slightly differently personalized till if it's your second order or repeater order. Just simple things like saying welcome back rather than thank you and those kind of things. And it's been something that's been, really well received by all of our customers, like you've just mentioned, because A, it seems to be quite novel. There don't seem to be many people kind of customizing that part of the experience. And B, it's just a really easy way for us to add value, right? And to not have to rely on you then on opening one of our later emails telling you about a cool way to use the product. Because I think everyone looks, if they don't read, they at least look very closely at all the material that comes with their order. And we have to be quite smart about it as well, because, we're not like a big kind of fashion brand selling, $200-$300 AOV product, or we're not like Net-a-Porter or something like that. So our packaging, it has to be fairly, not frugal, but it has to be fairly kind of cost effective. So it's nice and it's well packaged, but it's not like a $10 box, right? Because it's probably like maybe a $50-$60 AOV order. So it's hard to kind of do that. But it was one way of, I think, upping the experience in a way that wasn't wasteful and really added value to the customer.
So from an operational standpoint, does that mean you're doing your own fulfillment, or are you working with a 3PL to handle that?
We have a third-party warehouse, but within that, we have our own kind of section and our own not our own people. They're employed by them, but they work dedicated on our account. And then we have our own printer. So as every order comes out, that's printed on a special type of like postcard fold-up type paper.
Let's walk a little more through that process. Like, how do you go about buying a printer to put in a 3PL? Is it just as simple as working with the right 3PL and they're willing to do those things?
Yeah, if you're working with the right friendly 3PL and you're relatively important enough as a customer, then, I think the good ones, they kind of want to embed their process around you. The one where we are, they do obviously all different kinds of products from cosmetics. But the one thing I've seen as well is like they do like baby clothes for some brand. And they've got another station where every single order is being embroidered with the customer's initials or the baby's initials or whatever it might be. And I'd have thought, God, there's no way you get a 3PL to teach its staff how to do embroidery on an embroidery machine and embroider every set of kind of baby clothes that they send out, but they do. So maybe it's just a case of, finding the right one. But yeah, we've certainly been lucky with them.
Are they relatively close to you, or?
In terms of time in a car, they'd be like 2 hours away, but we might only physically visit them like twice a year or something like that. But in the UK, you've got to remember, compared to the US, everything is relatively close. Yeah. We can ship anything in the UK like next day very easily. If someone orders by 4 or 5 p.m., we can have an order to them the next morning. In the US, that's more difficult. But like shipping from the UK to US, normally we're like 1 or 2 days, especially to New York and LA, can be quite quick.
Yeah. So do you guys have any regulatory requirements for your products in the UK?
Yeah. So in the US, it's all kind of FDA. So, that was a big chunk of work for us in terms of the US, because I'm trying to think of the best way of explaining it. If you think of any food product in the US, you'll be aware of that supplement facts panel on the back where it tells you how much protein, how much carbs, and all the rest of it. Now, the way that that's laid out and all the things that you can and can't say about the product, that's governed by all of your regulations. Now, we have similar regulations in the UK, but they're roughly the same, but they're just slightly different. So we have effectively different packaging in the UK and the US. same product inside, but obviously the UK packaging explains all that product and the nutrition information according to the UK EU regulations, and the US product according to the, you know, the supplement facts panel type layout and claims.
What was the decision to market to Americans, and how much of your business is it? Is it a big chunk?
It's not a big chunk. At the moment, it's around 15%, something like that. We only launched in the US at the beginning of COVID. So it wasn't like the best kind of timing in terms of like a lot of our physical activations. So that's something that will be coming up more for us this year. We're working to have a space in Miami for September, which will be cool. And then, you know, post-COVID, a lot more work kind of being out on the ground there. We grew the business very much in the UK by being in the right places to be discovered. So we never went after big volume channels. We went after the kind of places that fit with the brand and the kind of places we'd like to be discovered. So, you know, like high-end retailers like Harrods and Selfridges, or cool places like Soho House, for example. So we're in all Soho houses in Europe and the UK. And hotels actually is a really big thing for us. So we're often in minibars in hotels, our small kind of travel sachets. You know, Equinox Hotel in New York City, we're in the minibars there, which is cool. But yeah, we'll get kind of boots on the ground as things open up like later this year, and do much more, I think, to be in the right kind of boutique gyms around New York and probably Miami as well. And then kind of boutique grocery as well.
What percentage of your sales then are through the channel versus direct to consumer?
So direct to consumers around 70% overall, and about 30% wholesale.
And then you think it's that wholesale that's driving the customer acquisition, or do y'all lean on other?
It's really hard to know. We do a lot of work in terms of surveying and like trying to track cross-platform. And especially we have an Amazon channel as well. So we have a little bit of a nightmare trying to track people from our own website across to Amazon and back again, but people move in all kinds of direction. But certainly awareness in terms of events for us here has been a really big thing. And then also, yeah, physical presence in stores.
Talk about marketing to Americans versus Europeans.
We're still learning in terms of what works in America. I think the way I would characterize it from what I've seen so far is in America, I think you have to be a lot more full on and in your face. Whereas here, it's a lot more kind of reserved and not laid back, but like understated or something. I don't know. There's a bit of a difference. I mean, like our head of growth and data scientist, Brian, he lives in Brooklyn, he's American. And I can see that with him. His ideas are great. They're much more kind of out there than what we English would have done. And I think that's something where we need to kind of, you know, get better and become kind of more Americanized a little bit, but still keep our kind of English sensibilities as we progress there.
I mean, when we used to market to Europeans, I found that the conversion rates were far lower on the website for British. And I don't know if it's just as simple as we were an American company and, you know, they thought we didn't serve them, or if it was more of the buying behavior, if Americans were more apt to just purchase online.
Yeah. I mean, it might just be that the traffic wasn't as relevant because you're more well known in the US. I mean, we see the same thing. In the US, our conversion rate is very low. In the UK, it's kind of very high. It's probably like too high, to be honest. We need to get more traffic in the UK. But I mean, and it's interesting you see that, which is obviously the opposite problem from the opposite direction. I mean, I wondered whether, you know, for us seeing lower conversion rate in the US is because of like hurdles like shipping charges. But actually our shipping charge in the US, and I mean, maybe you can tell me, having used our website, I don't think you'd even know that we're a UK company from our US website. You know, it's all in dollars. Unless you looked at our actual postal address, I don't think you'd notice. I'm not sure.
Yeah, if I came there from an ad or something, I would have no idea that y'all were British or was coming from Britain. And your package got there super quick. I mean, obviously, when you get your tracking updates, and you'll learn that in time. But how does DHL do that? I mean, how do you make money on that? Like, are you making money?
Well, I mean, we don't make money on the shipping because I think the shipping charge for the US, we just charge $6, which just from our research seemed like a reasonable amount that we could charge for that kind of order, but costs us about 12. So obviously we're losing like $6 or $7 or something on the actual shipping, but we're absorbing that on the margin. And we just took that decision because, you know, we kind of had the margin to absorb it. And, you know, I think just a higher price shipping would be kind of, you know, a bit of a hurdle for customers.
Yeah. It's just DHL does a bunch of that. And I mean, I think everything that we send international is $15 or something like that. But
Yeah.
And then in addition to like serving Americans, do you view serving other European customers outside of Britain?
We had quite a lot of European customers, and then you probably heard about Brexit, which frankly has been a disaster for UK companies shipping to the EU. It's still possible, but it's just so much more cumbersome now in terms of paperwork, so much more costly and so much more slow. So we've done our best to kind of hold on to as much of that business as we can. It's got so much more expensive in terms of shipping now that we're kind of not really making any money on it ourselves. We haven't put up our shipping prices to our customers because we just want to hold on to them until about hopefully like June or July, when we'll set up a warehouse in Poland and start to fulfill European orders from there. And that will bring down our costs again. But yeah, I mean, that's really frustrating because you know what it's like. You work so hard to build a business in a particular geography, and then something, just a curveball comes out and, well, suddenly it just becomes more expensive or so much more difficult. Very frustrating.
Yeah, business just a series of problems you got to solve.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Never end, man. Never end. One problem you were talking about before we started to record this episode was coming up with ideas on Clubhouse. You guys sponsor a Clubhouse room? You're the first person I've ever heard doing that. Like, walk me through that real quick.
Oh, well, so I don't know if you like the largest club on Clubhouse is called Human Behavior Club. I think it has like 500,000 members or followers or whatever they call them. But whatever it is, it's the biggest club on there. And we kind of host a weekly Form Nutrition series on nutrition, obviously, every week. Like 8 Sleep host one, I think, on sleep and performance every week as well, and a few other people as well. So that's just been really interesting. Obviously, it's a new platform that we've just been kind of getting to know. But it was blown away really initially by the number of people in the rooms. I think the first room we did, we had like, 700-800 people in there, which is just a crazy amount of people. And then I was also really impressed by the quality of the audience as well. So we were talking, quite in depth about, in that example, I think it was intermittent fasting. And then, the questions that we'd have at the end were from, PhDs or people at research centers or really well-informed, just general public who are super interested and super well-informed. So I was really impressed by the quality of that. I mean, I think everyone's kind of dissing Clubhouse a little bit now, but I think it's like everything, you've just got to find your little niche in there. And sure, there's a load of kind of trash going on in there talking about like get rich quick or Bitcoin or whatever it might be. But for like niche interest groups such as nutrition and the kind of stuff that we talk about, there's a really interesting crowd.
Yeah. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they follow you? Where can they buy your things?
Obviously, our website's just formnutrition.com. All of our social handles are Form Nutrition as well. I'm on most social things just as Damian Soong. I'm most active on Twitter, as you know, although I wouldn't call myself an active Twitterer. I haven't got a big following or massive kind of tweet count or anything. And my Instagram's not been updated for a little while, but I'm there as well.
And your last name is spelled Soong.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Damian Soong. Man, thanks for coming on the show. I'm glad we were finally able to connect and as real life as you get nowadays with all the lockdowns. It's been a pleasure. I admire what you're doing with Form. I think it's really a brilliant business and you're building something quite amazing. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope our listeners were able to pick a nugget or two. Go ahead, buy something from Form Nutrition. You will not regret it. Just seeing the post-purchase booklet as well is worth the investment. As always, thanks for listening. Cheers. Keep on growing.